THCA, and an easy way to make it would be to get buds and just soak it in organic olive oil, keep it in the dark, give it a shake every day, and probably a few weeks later you can strain it out and the THC will have moved into the oil, the trichomes. Anyway, now I've got Dr. Ben to come and talk to us. So I heard, Dr. Ben, I think I'm right in saying you're a pioneer in Aussie legal medical cannabis, aren't you? Burley Heads. I'm calling him a pioneer, not knowing that much about it. But you said something to me in a talk a while ago which has stuck with me, because I've got a daughter who's just done chemo for cancer, and he said to me, because he's a New Zealander, I found it really interesting, that in Australia, where you can sue the doctors, they just send you down the straight and narrow path. But I think I heard you say in New Zealand, which I love that in New Zealand you can't sue people, the same as here, they tend to give people or encourage people to try alternative treatments. That was really interesting for me. True story?
True story.
Yeah.
Yep. It's very hard to sue a doctor in New Zealand. Very hard.
Thanks heaps for coming down today. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me, Michael.
You're on that mic there.
I'm right. Thank you very much for having me down to talk. I'm a bit of a stander and a walker when I talk. It's interesting that the talk before from David was talking about the funds for road safety going to the police, and it's quite ironic when you're driving into beautiful Nimbin looking at the roadworks that need to be done which would make the roads safer. It's a bit of a field day for the TGA up here. Lyme's disease. You can't say that in Australia. There's no Lyme's disease in Australia. No. You can say Lyme-like. But you could only say Lyme-like about 5 years ago. Before that, even if you said Lyme-like disease, as a doctor, you would get in trouble. Long story on that. Let's stick to cannabis. Next slide, please. I'm going to follow on. Oh, first slide, please.
First slide, and go.
Disclosures. Yeah, I'm a doctor of medicine, so I've got to stick to the straight and narrow generally when I talk. I'm a director of Queensland Hemp, which is a private company. Founder of Cannabis Doctors Australia, Canview and Burley Heads. From right back in the day, we decided that we would get involved in the business.
You're right.
And we started CDA Health, which is a family-run business, which eventually grew with the clinics and also the distribution platform. Canview, if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. Merged with Kronos and then subsequently called Vitura. It's a great platform, puts through a lot of different products out there. That's my disclosures. Let's go through the next slide, please. So part of the reason that I got involved, we look back in time, 1998, the US Department of Health patented cannabinoids as neuroprotectors. The US government knew about it, the US Department of Health patented it. And unfortunately my mother passed away from a neurodegenerative condition, and it really pissed me off when I found that out, that the government knew that cannabinoids potentially could have given her an easier life, a longer life, and maybe she could have seen my little children on the right. Next slide, please. But time rolls on, 2013, CNN's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, had a mea culpa and went, I'm wrong, after saying for so many years, cannabis is bad, MK, drugs are bad, MK. Turned around and said, I was actually really wrong, cannabis does help. And if you haven't looked up his mea culpa online, it's a nice sort of YouTube thing to look at late in the evening. Next slide, please. So, since 2016 was the legislation, and this is the number of SASB approvals, so the B pathway is the most common pathway for prescribing cannabis, although with the other pathway we'll look at in a second. We can look at how many prescriptions have come through over the years. So back in 2016, not much going on, and we were involved back there, 2017. TGA was not really looking at doing too many, just the really hard patients, didn't really know what they're going to do with it, still working it out. 2018, I did my first SASB on paper, and it was about that thick worth of journal articles to send through to the TGA team to get approval for my very first patient. And we faxed that through because, you know, see, 2018, faxes are still the way that we do things. So I faxed that through, and this chap who had low back pain was approved for CBD. And it worked really well, interestingly enough, the CBD for his low back pain. So well, and it was so hard and expensive back then, for him to get it in 2018, he actually moved to California, took a job up there, because it was easier for him back then to get a CBD that way, simply move country. But over time, the number of approvals and patients went up and up and up. And on the right, can you see that very well there? It's pretty light. That's the indications on the right, and the most common indication is chronic pain. The second most common is anxiety. The third most common is sleep disorder. The fourth most common is cancer. And then it drops away from there. And the under 18s, autistic kids, or autism or autism spectrum disorder is the most common prescription. From 18 to 44, it's anxiety over chronic pain, and over 45-year-olds, chronic pain, most common prescriptions. Oil is still the most common, although flower has come up in the last couple of years as more patients have come on from the green market across to the medical side. If you look overseas, more vapes are used than flower, and I think that's probably where the transition will be moving forward. Next slide, please. The other pathway is called authorised prescriber pathway, so MAPs. The number of patients initiated on treatment in the last half of last year, this is the data that we get from the TGA, 160,000. That's incorrect because the way that it's recorded is double-ups. So it's not accurate data. How many patients are there in the medical model in Australia? 65,000, 200,000, somewhere around there. Can't really tell from the way that the data's taken. Next slide, please. That's new patient prescriptions and then repeat prescriptions recorded through the MAP. There's two pathways, and it's not accurate. We can only make a guess out of it, and they're doubled up. Yeah. This is the data from CanView, which is released through the company there, looking at the number of units per quarter, and certainly there's a number of units is going up each quarter. Nearly 250,000 units going out of CanView alone. CanView probably does about 50% of the market. So the amount of product use across Australia on the medical side of things certainly is going up. Next slide, please. What else is going up? Well, the number of clinical trials and better clinical trials. What's the gold standard, the green standard, if you will? There's the RCT, randomised controlled trial. But to get that really good data, you need a really individual product, and you're only testing that one product rather than a class of cannabis or cannabis plants. When you're talking about trying to test specific flowers, there's so many different terpenes and flavonoids that really you would have to have a really strain-specific a product to push through. And even then, for registration, it would be very hard and quite expensive. So isolates will be the first thing that will be registered. But we're not there yet. Maybe later in the year there'll be some across-the-counter S3 CBD, but it's proving quite difficult to get the science right. Next slide, please. As Deb alluded to there, cannabinoids can be used for cancer, and there's a number of reasonable studies out there, but there's no silver bullet out there that says, yes, absolutely it does work for cancer. Certainly there's many different pathways that cannabinoids can work on. THCA, yes, there's a bit of clinical data out there. Yes, there's more Petri dish data out there and animal model data out there. But it's broad across all the different types of cannabinoids that they may do positive things. I say may because it hasn't green bullet been proved yet. When we're prescribing, generally it's CBD with THC. You need a bit of both. And generally when we prescribe, it's a bit of a best guess. Because there is no guideline on it, we have to take a guess from what people are studying out there. So we would prescribe an oral CBD, 50 milligrams twice a day, and then a THC at night, 5 to 20 milligrams. And that's based on what most of the studies are looking at present, around that dose range. Next slide, please. When will we not use cannabis or cannabinoids? And please do pass this on to your pathways and the people you talk to your groups. In immunotherapy treatment for cancer, we may be doing harm if we're taking a cannabinoid, because it can modulate your immune system and you're trying to use the immunotherapy to kill the cancer. This is a small study, it only had 140 patients in it, and it was for non-small cell lung cancer that had progressed and metastasized. Next slide, please. But it's not, again, an absolute, because there were some issues with the study not being completely homogeneous in their patient groups. So the cannabis using patients that did worse had slightly different demographics. Okay, last slide. But I expect there's probably more questions than me talking, or maybe not. So I'll open up the floor. Start at the front, go to Deb, do the hard one first.
I just want to say that just recently, just the other day, there's been some studies released on glioblastoma from Judith Lacey, a really prominent Australian researcher through the Southern Cross University of Queensland, and they've just released a little bit of evidence around tumour reduction and markers producing in that.
Yep. So what Deb's saying back down the front here, recent study coming out of Southern Cross University, glioblastoma multiforme, so aggressive brain cancer. It does have good data on that. There's lots of studies actually on that particular type of cancer where it does really well. So if you do have a brain tumour or brain cancer, generally the cannabinoids do really well because there's lots of receptors there, and the cannabinoids go in there and interact in a positive manner.
And I think the reason that that's so positive is because it's Australia, you know, like finally they're always asking us to show research and evidence, and finally we're getting researchers and clinicians to go, right, we'll give it to you. So that's
yeah, certainly if I had cancer myself personally, I would be looking towards taking some cannabinoids to help with that, with the exception of if I had immunotherapy.
Excellent. So when we get CBD here in Australia, it's isolated. Anything that's imported has been isolated, so it's still CBD.
No.
That's not correct?
Not correct. There is, in the product-wise in Australia, there's somewhere north of 400 medicinal products available. And they range from isolates, both of CBD, THC, or potentially you could find a distributor with a specific cannabinoid, a broad spectrum, so a CBD with the other cannabinoids but no THC, still legal to drive, or a full spectrum product which has some THC in it. There is literally the broadest range out there available.
Made from a mixture of isolates, sometimes.
No.
They're not made from a whole plant.
Incorrect. Depends on your product. So it depends on your product. Just try to yell at the microphone. Some products are whole flower. It depends on the particular products. Some are made from isolate. The CBD isolate products will be made from hemp CBD because that's the cheapest way to make it. It'll be Kentucky, USA hemp CBD, then put into an oil. It's two things put together.
Not isolated for CBD content and the THC content.
It depends on the product. And in saying that, some people do respond specifically only to the isolate. But some people will respond to the broad spectrum, some people to the full spectrum, some to a 50-50 mixture. Yeah.
That's my problem. Is the isolate is playing, in my opinion, is playing wrong. We've got the plants that are putting together the combinations, and with your point earlier regarding legal medicines being better than the ones you can make yourself, I've just got to dispute that.
Yeah,
the
no.
fact that the ones that are coming through the pharmaceutical companies are not as good as the ones that come through.
Potentially. So, but that's on a case-by-case basis, I think what you're saying there. So I have had patients come and say, look, I've tried your medicinal stuff, doesn't work for me. I use my own stuff, fine, great, that's good. It works perfectly better for you, great. I'm not disputing that. There's different ways to make medicines. So aspirin has saved billions of lives, and it's made from willow bark. And we don't grow oak trees or willows and shred them. We make it in the lab, and it works just as well. So it's still a carbon molecule made by God.
True, very true. And I have to say that in this case, the cannabis plant is an exception.
Full spectrum, yes, for most things, yes, absolutely can be better. Yeah, but it's on a patient by patient basis. You can't say every patient should have a full spectrum.
But efficacy-wise, just from our experience here locally, and it's only anecdotal, of course, and it's not lab tested, although we do lab test a lot of what we do. The whole plant extracts are just much more effective for whatever it is that you're using them for. You've got to be specific, obviously. Like, so if you're using it for pain, a homegrown extract rubbed onto the pain works better than a high-power pain-killing.
I'll say one thing about absolutes. They're always absolutely wrong.
Okay.
Okay, so I tell my little girls every day. Not every day, they tend to get the picture after a while. Yes, full spectrum products can be better for most people, I would agree with, for most conditions that we treat. But it's not for everyone. Yeah, there is full spectrum products out there in CBD, THC, and maybe every day everyone should be taking, 1 to 100 on a full spectrum. Maybe that would be beneficial. Maybe we should put that in the water in Moscow.
But a full spectrum can be, it just depends on the plant, doesn't it?
It does depend on the plant.
So you've got a hemp plant, for instance, and you're going to be producing high quantities of CBD, presumably, and lower quantities of THC.
Zero.
Well, not zero, but very low.
Very low, yeah.
Very low. You can't get to zero. And this is why isolates, in my opinion, are the wrong way to go. Because that tiny little fraction of THC that's in that predominantly CBD mix, it might only be 1,000.
I think they test it down to parts per million, and those isolates that come through, they'll have zero on the testing. But it would work. I've had an autistic child come and destroy my office on the very first consult, took an isolate, came in next time, reading his book. What are we trying to treat? Are we trying to treat Are we trying to treat the autistic child, or are we trying to treat our own selves because we think full spectrum or broad spectrum is better? Yeah.
Next time you talk, you've got to come up here. We can't hear you up the back. Debbie, speak up. You can talk.
We can debate this over coffee outside. Yeah. Moving on. Navigating it. It was a shit show. And his question was, can you comment on your navigation of the TGA, the authorities, the regulators? It was a shit show in the beginning. I'll give you a little story. When we first started, we thought, right, Burleyhead's cannabis, we know what we're going to do. We're really passionate about this. We're going to get into the industry. We're going to go to Queensland Hemp. We're going to have this facility. We're going to import and be able to give this to patients. We sent in our application, again, by fax, Vic, and they said, no, you can't do that. That's the wrong way to do your application in your standard operating procedures. No, but that's the right way. So I rewrote them, sent them back in. They read them and they went, actually, you're right the first time, can you change it back? Yeah, so I think a lot of the regulators in the beginning have been feeling their way through it and trying to learn, and over time they're becoming a bit more proactive with where they need to be. We're at the point now where we can apply for a cannabis category, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the THC content. I said that was a shit idea. but they still went ahead with it. It would have been easier just to do Schedule 4, Schedule 8, like we have already. So it just adds another beautiful layer of complexity in cannabis. Yeah.
I think if you want to ask a question, come up here and talk on this. What do you reckon?
Yeah, put them on the spot. No more hard questions about full spectrum.
He's cool, don't do that.
Don't stand right in front of the microphone though, because it'll blow out.
I just wanted to say thanks so much for the work that you've done, and also I'm really keen to hear about your interest in the neuroprotective space, particularly if there's any application currently for preventing things like genetic predisposed Alzheimer's.
Yeah, great question. I'm absolutely very passionate about that because my mother died from that. My grandfather died of that, so I'm 42 and I've got a 50-50 chance of being here at 50. So a vested interest as well. Yes, there is. There are a number of companies that are looking at that. Myself, I'm very passionate about that particular space, so we will be looking at a specific product development. Will it be full spectrum? Probably not. Will it have other cannabinoids in it? Maybe. But if we can take that molecule created by the cannabis gods and prove that it works and have a proof, a scientific proof, then that's helpful to society, and that's doing it for mum upstairs. Cool. Question at the back?
Don't be shy.
We were just saying had a lot of success with Alzheimer's with CBD with a little bit of THC in it.
Yeah.
Quite good result.
Yeah.
It just seems to slow the process down.
Yeah, it's about a 1 to 10 mixture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alzheimer's and treating it for day-to-day symptoms, but also disease progression. Maybe it's a 1 to 10 mix. I guess that was our guess back in 2018. Actually, not a cure, but yeah.
Can we prescribe for that at the moment in Australia?
Yep. Is there a 1 to 10 out there? Tilray might have one, but you just get a THC and a CBD. Get a broad spectrum or a full spectrum if you want CBD to mix it with your THC, which is the THCs are generally pretty full spectrum because it's easier just to take the plant and rather than shred it down in the molecules, which actually cost more money, just take the whole plant.
Just my
There's a mic here if anyone wants to take the floor.
Or beatbox.
Ben, can I ask you? So you've been doing this for quite a while now. What ailments have you found cannabis the most successful, most beneficial for? What works
The
the
most? Chronic pain's the number one prescriber. What's the most miracle cure? Autistic kids when it does work. But that's 1 in 10, 1 in 5 autistic kids will have a real amazing response, and that's the real turnaround from functionality to learning to family interaction.
Is that THC usually?
Usually CBD.
Okay.
Yeah, but some kids THC, and that was a real process back in the day, trying to convince a paediatrician to write a letter to give a kid THC, heaven forbid, but when to give them all these other legal pharma psychedelics, and then convince the TGA to do it as well. And when it came to those kids, it was 50-50 whether THC actually worked for them.
But it does happen.
It does happen. Yeah.
Advocate, it does happen. I've seen heaps of kids and...
When it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't, like everything else. Like if you get given a drug by a doctor and they say, here, take this pill, what do you take? The pill? No, I take about a quarter first to see if I'm sensitive to it. And then I build up, right? And if that pill works, great, excellent. We're trying to treat an issue with a patient or with ourselves. Do it slowly, do it safely, titrate, and see if it works.
More questions?
What do you think about the new research that CBD stops COVID?
Probably the reason because there's studies looking at that is because the government here in Australia and around the world put out grants for new treatments, novel treatments for COVID. And of course, that's an easy way to get some bucks into your funding. 200 grand, I think they'll pay them to do a study in Australia. So yes, it may indeed have some effect, but you need much bigger, larger studies to really prove it, I think.
Just on that question.
Oh, a COVID questioning? Oh, no.
Yeah, no, I'm not but do you see that it actually could strengthen your immune system?
Yes, yep. Could it strengthen your immune system? Yeah, I call it immunomodulation. Really, when you're taking CBD regularly, you're blocking the breakdown of your own natural endocannabinoids, so you're turning up your volume, you're turning up your gain in your body, so your body's more responsive. So CBD needs to be taken regularly because it has downstream cellular changes which take days, months to work, so regular CBD before it starts to work. Right at the back. What's the research with anxiety? You probably need more than 50 milligrams of CBD for it to work for anxiety. There's already heaps of patients out there that say it works for THC, but as we know, THC can make your anxiety worse, so it depends on your patient and your response.
So you won't be leaving CBG? No, you didn't mention anything about
CBG, yeah, a minor cannabinoid. I'd love to have some CBG to use mostly in IBS and Crohn's disease. There's no product with that specifically in the market. There's a few broad spectrums out there. What's that one? Phytoca maybe. What's the other broad? Jeez, Deb. Boy, there's some broads out there with some CBG in them.
So it's impossible in
Provides
Australia
Is it legal,
to
CBG?
have yet a generic for CBG to grow
You can to grow CBG, like a CBG.
to harvest earlier to
Yes,
detect
it's
the
a Schedule 8, so only CBD under 98% is a Schedule 4. Schedule 8, more restrictions on it, like THC, but it's legal to have. You've got a prescription or you're using it for a therapeutic use. Because there's a human right to health. The highest legislation in Australia is the Constitution, and it points out a human right to health, and in that is a self-determination to your health.
What about, could we ever prescribe a plant to juice at home through the current medical system? So if you wanted to get CBGA and... Yes,
we've had some patients get the flower to get the non-decarboxylated THCA, CBDA for themselves, and then as I was alluding to before, either cold extraction in oil works or blend it up, yeah. But it's a bit expensive for the amount that you need to use for a lot of patients. Some of the pharmaceutical grade flower, you have some people take only 10 gram bud, maybe less than that, maybe 2 grams, and they'll blend it up, and that'll work for the IBS. But it's a little bit more cost prohibitive because of the amount of flour you've got to use.
Juicing raw plants on Crohn's and...
Yeah, well...
Any experience with it?
I've had some patients come in and it's worked, and it's clear that there's evidence out there that it has worked, absolutely. And maybe really it's the fan leaves that we should be putting into a product for people to use. I mean, it's trimmed away anyway.
Fresh is best.
Yeah.
Fresh is best.
Fresh is best, yeah. Fresh stuff coming out. Yeah. The pharmaceutical model does make it a little bit difficult for the fresh is best because of compliance with bacteria, yeast, mould. So a lot of product, especially post processing, has to be either irradiated or in some way sterilised. Yeah.
Not only that, your acetone, your CBGA and THCA, that's the most volatile. So getting those into a product that's going to last on a shelf would be difficult, wouldn't it?
Yeah, a fresh is it's going to have a use. Yes, used by date. You need to process it through. Yes, yeah. And if anyone's going to do it from a commercial point of view, it goes on the shelf, and then it's only got a certain shelf life before it's no longer fresh, like every other organic plant. So if you look overseas, where it's in a recreational model, people still going in there, there'll be turnover of that plant and that shelf product, right? Same as you would on your Woolworths.
So can you tell me, as a patient, can I now go to a clinic and get a consult and claim that on medican?
Absolutely. If you consult a doctor for your medical condition,
So I can
yeah.
go to a cannabis clinic.
Depends if they are charging Medicare, because there's a lot of clinics that will just be private billed because they don't want to get underneath Medicare. But your GP can do it. Any doctor in Australia can prescribe. Yeah.
GP's choice. Any GP can go through Medicare and just do it through that.
Are you talking about supply of specific product lines? Yeah, and that has been an issue because there's delays in getting through. Yeah. Absolutely, but yeah, doctor can charge a 23 Medicare or a 36 Medicare or even a chronic disease care plan, which is an hour with your GP and your new clinic. Depends on the product line. So if it's a highly used product and they have lots of grows going on, the demand doesn't go right up because you can see it's still a lot of demand coming in, and well, then yes, you'll have your product going through all the time. And we've had that with different product lines having issues with being very popular, people rush and grab it, disappears, and we can't get it, so we have to look for an alternative. But you are right, the right strain for the right patient at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd like to stress too, stress wasn't very an ill person. That's why I stayed with the green market. I know I can just go and get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you living in Nimbin? Well, then the green market's right outside the door, so. It's more reliable, exactly. Reliability is what we want in our medicine and our doctors and everyone else. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah. Great. Good question.
More questions? We're done. He's good, isn't he? When I saw you talk last time, no mucking around, straight answers. Your experience counts for heaps, Ben. It's great,
thanks, mate.
Really appreciate him coming down today. Come from Brisbane?
From the Goldie.
I
love driving through those hills. Great run. Thanks.
And I think some people want to talk privately. Maybe you'll hang around for a little bit. I'm sure he'll talk to you or Debbie. Feel free to corner them and tell them your own story. And I think we'll have a break for lunch before we're talking with Des, the compounding chemist, which is a whole new ballgame for us. He's the fine detail of how to make the right mixtures. Looking forward to it. So we'll have a break for an hour. Good lunch up there. Don't go away.
We've got some very interesting speakers from Spain coming on later on this afternoon, so do hang around. It's some very interesting speakers coming.
Yeah, we have the new legalised cannabis Member of Parliament from Victoria to talk, as well as Des Hub, and also Mark Seelan, who's been running a cannabis clinic, what do they call it? Like a dispensary in Spain for the last 8 years. Cannabis, what do they call? Cannabis Club, they're called there. Lots of good talk to come.